Hey there, friends. Are you ready for a spine-chilling tale that will keep you on the edge of your seat? This is the story of the abandoned school, a place where strange things happen and shadows dance in the dark. I can't wait to share this spooky adventure with you. As you listen, remember to comment below and let me know where you're from. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe. I have something special just for you. Click the link in the description below to learn more. Now, let's dive into the eerie world of the abandoned school. I was walking home from school one day when I passed the old, abandoned school on the corner of Maple Street. It looked so creepy with its broken windows and twisted vines covering the walls. Everyone said it was haunted, but I've always been curious about it. I felt a pull as if something inside was calling out to me. As I stood there, I remembered all the scary stories my friends had told me. They spoke of footsteps echoing in empty halls and whispers of kids who used to go there before it was closed down. My heart started to race. Was I brave enough to find out what really happened inside? I took a deep breath, pushed open the rusty gate, and stepped onto the cracked path leading to the door. The door creaked loudly as I pushed it open. It was dark inside, and the air felt heavy, like it hadn't been touched in years. I could barely see, but I noticed old desks and chairs scattered everywhere, like the school had just been left in a hurry. I took a few steps inside, and a chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me, a soft giggle that seemed to echo off the walls. I turned around quickly, but there was no one there. Just my imagination, I told myself. Or maybe it was a ghost. I decided to keep exploring even though I felt a little scared. I walked deeper into the building, each step making the wooden floorboards creak beneath me. The walls were covered in faded paintings, and the windows were so dirty that I could barely see outside. Then I entered a room that looked like it used to be a classroom. The chalkboard was still there, but it was covered in dust. I could almost picture the kids sitting at their desks, laughing and learning. As I looked around, something caught my eye near the corner of the room. It was a shiny object, an old silver locket. I picked it up, feeling a strange warmth radiating from it. As I opened it, I saw a picture of a girl with bright blue eyes. Who was she? I felt like I needed to find out more. But just then, I heard that giggle again, louder this time. My heart raced, and I felt icy fingers of fear creep up my back. I wanted to leave, but a part of me was determined to uncover the mystery. I clutched the locket tightly and headed towards the sound. The laughter led me down a dark hallway filled with shadows. Up ahead, I saw a flickering light coming from a classroom. My heart raced even faster. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The room was empty, but the light was coming from an old lantern that was swinging gently, as if someone had just left in a hurry. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me, making me jump. I whipped around, but I was alone. I could feel my heart thumping in my chest, and I could hear the faint sound of music playing, an old, cheerful tune that felt out of place in such a spooky school. I was both scared and curious. I decided to take a closer look at the lantern. As I reached for it, the music stopped and everything fell silent. I felt a cold breeze rush through the room, and a shiver ran down my spine. Just then, I heard the sound of footsteps coming from the hallway. They were slow and heavy, like someone was dragging their feet. I spun around, staring at the door, ready to run if I needed to. The footsteps stopped and the air felt tense. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, and just when I thought I would burst from anxiety, I saw a shadow slide past the crack under the door. I held my breath, waiting and waiting, but nothing happened. Slowly, I walked back to the lantern, but just as I reached it, the door burst open and there stood a tall figure. My heart dropped into my stomach. It was a woman, dressed in clothes that looked old-fashioned. Her hair was long and messy, and she had an eerie smile on her face. "Hello there, sweetheart," she said in a sweet yet unsettling voice. "Are you lost?" I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I felt rooted to the spot, unable to move. She took a step closer, and I could see her eyes. They seemed to glow in the dim light, filled with a strange sadness. "This was once a happy place," she continued, "but the fun times have long faded away. Would you like to join us in our games?" Before I could answer, I heard the giggle again, this time right next to me. I turned to see a group of children peeking from behind the old desks. Their faces were pale, and their eyes looked wide and bright. "Come play with us," they said in unison, their voices whispering like a gentle breeze. The woman smiled wider, and I could feel the fear creeping back in. "We have so much fun here," she said with an unsettling cheerfulness. I shook my head, heart racing, and stepped back. I need to go," I stammered. The woman's smile faded slightly, but the children looked disappointed. "You just got here," one of them pouted. "You can't leave yet." I knew I had to find a way to escape. I darted past the children and ran towards the door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. I pressed my back against the wall, my mind racing for an idea. "Please," I begged, my voice trembling. "I just want to go home." The woman stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "Home is where you make it, dear. Stay and play, or you might not be able to leave at all." The darkness seemed to close in around me, and I could feel the shadows creeping closer like they wanted to wrap around me. I took a deep breath and remembered the locket in my hand. Maybe it could help me somehow. "I found this," I shouted, holding the locket up high. The woman froze, and the children stared at it wide-eyed. "Who is this girl?" I asked, trying to sound brave even though my heart felt like it would burst from fear. The woman's expression changed from friendly to something darker. "That girl," she said slowly, her voice almost a whisper now, "was one of our own, and she never left." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What happened to her?" I asked, though I didn't really want to know. "She and her friends liked to play here, but one day they decided to explore the forbidden wing. They never came back," the woman said, her eyes filled with sorrow. "They were lost just like you might be." My heart raced as I thought of the dark hallway I had seen earlier. "Is the forbidden wing the place where they disappeared?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. The woman nodded slowly, and the children whispered among themselves. "It's a dangerous place," one of them said, "full of shadows and echoes of past games." "I need to go find them," I said, feeling brave despite my fear. "Maybe I can help them." The woman stretched out her hand, her smile returning, but this time it felt more like a warning. "You can try, but the shadows don't let go easily. Are you sure you want to disappear like them?" I looked from her to the children, who were all staring at me with pleading eyes. I couldn't just leave them here. "I'll help them," I shouted, determination filling my voice. "I won't give up that easily." The woman let out a soft laugh that sent a shiver down my spine. "Very well, but be careful. The forbidden wing is not a friendly place." Taking a deep breath, I turned and walked out of the classroom, my heart pounding with each step. The children and the woman watched me closely, their eyes filled with a mix of hope and concern. I could feel the weight of the locket in my pocket, guiding me as I made my way to the dark hallway at the end of the building. As I entered the hallway, I could feel the temperature drop. The air was thick, and each step felt heavier than the last. I turned my head back, half expecting to find the woman or the children following me, but they stayed behind, watching silently. The hallway felt long and endless. Shadows danced along the walls, and I could see doors on either side that seemed to whisper my name when I passed by. I remembered the stories my friends had told, stories of kids who had gotten lost and never returned. I took a deep breath and pressed forward. At the end of the hallway, I reached a large wooden door, its surface worn and scratched. I reached out to touch it, and as my fingers brushed against the wood, the door creaked open slowly, revealing a room filled with darkness. Inside, I could see faint shapes lurking in the corners, their forms shifting and twisting. I stepped into the dark, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. The locket felt warm in my pocket, as if it held the key to their escape. "Is anyone here?" I called out, my voice shaky but loud. The shadows responded with silence. Taking another cautious step forward, I felt a sudden gust of wind rush past me, and a whisper filled the air. "Help us." I squinted into the darkness, trying to see where the voice was coming from. "Who are you?" I shouted, hoping for an answer. "I am Lucy," the voice replied, soft and echoing. "I was trapped here just like the others. Can you save us?" "Yes," I shouted back. "Where are you?" "Follow the sound of the shadows," she said, and I felt a strange pull towards a corner of the room where the darkness seemed to swirl just a bit more than the rest. I moved slowly, feeling my way through the thick air. Shadows flickered around me, and I could hear faint cries coming from every direction. They were scared and lost, just like I had almost been. "Please hurry," Lucy's voice urged me again. "Time is running out." In a burst of courage, I rushed to the corner, where the shadows felt the darkest. "I'm here," I shouted, clutching the locket tightly. "I won't leave you behind." As I stood there, the shadows began to swirl more violently until a figure emerged at the edge of the darkness. It was a girl with bright blue eyes, exactly like the one in the locket. My heart skipped a beat. "Lucy," I cried out, reaching for her. She looked just like the photo, but her face was solemn, filled with sadness. "I'm here to help you." Lucy smiled weakly. "You found the locket. It's what connects us. But you must be careful. The shadows don't want to let us go." I could feel their cold tendrils creeping closer, urging me to turn back. But I shook my head, refusing to give in. "We're getting out of here," I declared, my voice strong. Lucy nodded, and as her figure became clearer, I saw her friends emerging from the darkness behind her. They looked scared and lost, trapped in the shadows. "There's a way out, but we need your help," Lucy said, her voice trembling. "You must find the light." I remembered the lantern I had seen earlier in the classroom. It was still swinging gently, ready to guide us. "Follow me," I shouted, determined to lead them to safety. Turning back towards the way I came, I felt the shadows closing in. "Hurry," I called to them. "We need to reach the light." The air grew colder, and I could hear the whispers of the shadows growing louder, trying to silence us. "You can't escape," they hissed. "You will join us forever." Ignoring their voices, I sprinted down the dark hallway, the warmth of the locket pushing me forward. I turned the corner and reached the classroom door, flinging it open with all my strength. "Quick! Everyone in!" I shouted, and the kids rushed inside, the shadows trailing behind them. I followed closely, feeling the cold breath of the darkness on my back. Just as I stepped inside, the door slammed shut, and I turned to face the angry shadows pressing against the door. "Not today," I shouted, holding up the locket. "You can't take them." The shadows recoiled as if the locket burned them, and at that moment, the lantern flickered back to life. The soft, warm glow illuminated the room, the shadows retreating and revealing the frightened faces of the children behind me. "Stay close," I called to them, holding up the locket, its glow illuminating the room like a beacon of hope. They huddled together, their wide eyes reflecting the light as they looked at me, their expressions a mix of fear and trust. I knew I had to act fast, or the shadows would come for us again. As the shadows lurked near the door, whispering threats and voices that sounded like wind rustling through dead leaves, I looked around the room. The old desks and chairs seemed to come alive in the dim light, their shapes shifting as if they were reaching out. I could hear the shadows howling softly, trying to discourage me from what lay ahead. "You shouldn't have come here," they hissed, their voices echoing unnaturally around the room. "You will join us in the dark forever." I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I refused to give in to their fear. "No, I will not let that happen," I declared, raising the locket higher. It pulsed with warmth, and the shadows shrank back slightly as if the light hurt them. "You're not going to take these children." Suddenly, the lantern flickered violently, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I glanced around, trying to keep my focus. "We need to reach the exit," I shouted to Lucy and her friends, who stood frozen, their eyes darting around in panic. I could see a door on the far side of the room. It was half open, a sliver of light shining from within. "That's our way out." With a burst of courage, I dashed toward the door with the other kids following close behind me. The shadows sensed our movement and began to swirl around, rushing toward us like a dark storm. "Don't look back. Keep moving," I urged as I sprinted faster, my heart pounding in my chest. As we reached the door, I felt a sudden force pull at my legs, almost as if the shadows were trying to grab me. I stumbled but quickly regained my balance. The door loomed like a portal to safety, and without hesitation I pushed through, pulling Lucy and her friends alongside me. On the other side was a narrow hallway, its walls lined with dusty lockers and peeling paint. The light from the lantern spilled into the darkness, casting long shadows that seemed to dance menacingly. I could hear the shadows crashing against the door behind us, desperately trying to break in. "Which way?" I gasped, panting from the rush and the fear surging through me. The hallway stretched endlessly before us, filled with doors that all looked the same. "Lucy, do you know where to go?" She pointed down the corridor. "We need to find the stairs. They lead to the exit." Just as we started to run, a loud slam echoed through the hallway, causing me to jump. I turned just in time to see the shadows form into twisted faces, their mouths stretching in silent screams filled with rage. "You can never escape. You cannot leave," they wailed, the voices overlapping like a chorus of tortured spirits. Panic surged through me and I urged the kids to run faster. "This way," I yelled, darting left, hoping to find an exit. The darkness began to close in again. Felt suffocating, almost like the walls were closing around us. I could hear the low growls of the shadows and I felt their cold breath chasing us. As we ran, the flickering light of the lantern became erratic, flickering like it would go out any moment. I clutched it tighter, willing it to shine bright. "Stay close together," I shouted, trying to calm the children. "Keep your eyes on me." I spotted a staircase at the end of the hallway. "There," I pointed, relief flooding my chest as I sprinted toward it. But just then, a gust of cold air rushed past, extinguishing the lantern briefly. In that moment of darkness, I felt something brush against my arm, cold and clammy. It was as if the shadows were reaching for me, their fingers trailing along my skin. "Run," I shouted, and we dashed up the stairs in a blur. My legs felt heavy as if the air itself was trying to hold us back, but I pushed through. The shadows screeched, their voices growing angry behind us, echoing off the walls. "You will pay for this. You belong to us." As I reached the top, I stumbled onto a landing that opened into an enormous, dimly lit room filled with broken furniture and dusty windows. The gloom hung in the air like thick fog, and every corner seemed to hide a frightening secret. "Where do we go now?" I asked, my voice shaky. Lucy pointed to a window on the far side of the room, barely visible through layers of grime. "There. We can climb out." I rushed towards it, glancing back toward the stairs. I could see shadows creeping up behind us, dark shapes twisting and turning as they chased after us. "Come on," I cried, urgency rising in my chest. "We have to hurry." Reaching the window, I pulled at it. It wouldn't budge. I pushed harder, frustration flooding my mind, while the whispers of the shadows grew louder, filling my ears with terror. "You can't leave, you're ours. Help me." I yelled to the children, panic rising. They crowded around, pushing on the window together. With one last heave, I felt it crack and then shatter beneath our combined strength. "We did it," I exclaimed, but the moment of triumph vanished as the shadows rushed closer, their tendrils reaching out for us. I climbed through the broken window first, the jagged edges scraping against my skin as I pulled myself outside. The cold night air hit me like a wave, shocking me to my senses. "Hurry," I called back, helping Lucy and the others to squeeze through. But just as the last child was about to push through, I heard a chilling laugh echo behind us, slithering through the air like a serpent. "You think you can escape us that easily? You belong to the darkness now." I felt a surge of fear and adrenaline as I grabbed the last child and pulled him through just as the shadows swirled around the base of the window. We landed on the grass outside, gasping in fresh, cool air, but the nightmare didn't end there. The shadows pooled around the old school, writhing like smoke, filling the air with an overwhelming sense of dread. I looked back, and the figure of the woman stood in the shattered window, her eyes glowing in the darkness, a twisted smile on her face. "This isn't over," she screeched before fading back into the shadows. The children scrambled to their feet, fear and confusion swirling in their eyes. "What do we do now?" one of them asked, trembling. "We have to run," I urged, scanning the darkened street around us. I could see the outline of the old school behind us, shadows still swirling ominously. "They won't stop chasing us until we are far away." Without another word, we began to run down the street, panting heavily, adrenaline pounding in my ears. The sounds of rustling leaves echoed in the air, but beyond that, I could feel something watching us, a sinister presence lurking just out of sight. As we ran, the streetlights flickered and I glanced behind us. The darkness seemed to pulse, almost like it was alive. "I thought we left them behind," Lucy cried, her voice filled with panic. "We have to keep moving," I shouted, trying to push my fear aside. "They'll find us if we don't." Fingers of darkness reached out from the shadows lining the streets, trying to grasp at our heels as we sped away. The shadows were angry and relentless, chasing us down the night like vengeful spirits. We passed familiar houses that felt strangely unfamiliar in the dark, their windows hollow and dark. It was as if night itself had swallowed the whole neighborhood. I could hear the children behind me whimpering, their breaths short and heavy. "Over there." I pointed to an alley that snaked between two houses, a dark path that might offer a moment of respite. We dove into the narrow space, fear fueling our speed as we pressed tightly against the cool brick walls. The alley had an eerie stillness, the air thick with lingering dread. I looked behind us, half expecting to see the shadows spilling into the alley, their eyes glinting in the dark. I could faintly hear them whispering, as if debating whether to follow us into the narrow path. "There's no way they can fit in here," one of the kids said, trying to catch his breath. "Right?" "I'm not sure," I admitted, my heart pounding. I wasn't ready to let them know how afraid I truly was. I glanced towards the end of the alley, where a flicker of light shone from a distant street. That might be our escape. But before we could make a move, I heard the whispers again, clearer this time. "You can't hide forever. We will always be close," they taunted, echoing off the alley walls as if they were surrounding us. "Run," I said suddenly, urging the kids to move quickly towards the light. We dashed toward the opening at the end of the alley. Just as we reached the mouth of the alleyway, a figure emerged from the shadows, blocking our way. It was the same woman, her twisted smile spreading wide across her face, eyes blazing with malevolence. "Did you really think you could escape?" she hissed. I backed away instinctively, fear coursing through me. "No," I yelled, pushing the other children back to shield them. She advanced slowly, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. "You ventured too far into my domain. Now you must pay the price." The children huddled behind me, their terror radiating off them as I stood my ground. "You can't take us," I shouted, feeling the locket against my chest. It still pulsed with warmth, but I needed to harness that power. "Let's see how brave you are when the shadows come for you," she hissed, stretching her arms out like wings as the darkness began to swirl around her, thickening in the air. I could see the shadows crawling along the street, writhing, forming twisted shapes of despair. "The shadows are all around you. There is no escape." Driven by a sudden surge of desperation, I held the locket tightly and shouted, "You won't win. I will free these children." The air around me crackled with energy and the locket glowed brighter. The shadows recoiled slightly, the light pushing them back, but the woman's laugh rang out, echoing like thunder. "Foolish child. You don't understand the power you are dealing with." I had to keep her distracted. "Lucy, grab the lantern," I called out, remembering that with it we might be able to fight back. Lucy hesitated for a moment, but then darted past me to grab it from the ground where I had dropped it. Holding it high, I watched in awe as the light dimmed the shadows swirling around the woman. She staggered back, shock written on her face. "No, you cannot," she screeched. "Together," I shouted to the other kids. "Let's use the light." With a burst of courage, we all lifted our arms, holding the lantern and the locket up high. The light brightened, illuminating the night around us like a sun breaking through the clouds. The shadows hissed and screeched as they began to shrivel under the intense glow. "You think this will save you?" the woman screeched, but for the first time, there was fear in her voice. "Now?" I yelled, willing the light to push them back. Together, we pointed the light at her, feeling a power surge through us as the warmth spread from the locket and lantern wrapping around us. The woman shrieked, a sound that pierced through the air like broken glass. "You can't hold me. I am the darkness." But even as she spoke, her form began to flicker and fade, shadows pulling away from her like mist dispersing in the morning sun. With one last push, we surged forward, shining the light directly at her, and at that moment, the shadows surrounding her dissolved in a bright flash. A deafening sound echoed through the alley, and she vanished with a final, piercing scream. The night fell quiet. We stood there, hearts racing, panting in disbelief. The darkness that had seemed so foreboding moments before now felt less heavy, as if a weight had been lifted. I looked at the kids, their faces a mix of shock and relief. "We did it," someone whispered, and slowly smiles began to break across our faces. But in the depths of my mind, I knew that the shadows would not truly gone. A chill crept back into the air, the eerie quiet heavy with an unsettling feeling that prickled my skin. I looked around, half expecting shadows to creep back into my view. The kids were still gathered close, their eyes wide with confusion, relief beginning to mingle with fear. "What do we do now?" Lucy asked, her voice shaky. "Let's get away from here," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "We can't stay in this alley. It's not safe." As we turned to leave, I heard a faint, haunting laugh echo from the darkness around us. It sent a cold shiver down my spine, freezing me in my tracks. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, glancing over my shoulder. Shadows seemed to sway eerily, almost alive, seeming to watch us with dark intent. "Maybe it was just a cat," one of the kids murmured, but we all knew it wasn't. The laughter was too deep, too chilling, and it crept into my bones, filling me with dread. I forced myself to keep moving, urging the others to follow as I cautiously stepped into the faint light of the street again. We walked quickly away from the alley, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see movement, shadows darting between streetlights, lurking just outside the pools of light. I could feel them like the weight of an unseen presence hovering just behind us. "Keep your eyes forward," I told the kids as we moved along the cracked pavement, our footsteps echoing in the still night. Suddenly, a loud crash interrupted the silence, coming from a nearby house. We all jumped, hearts racing. The sound was followed by skittering noises, like something was being knocked over inside. "What was that?" another child whimpered, glancing anxiously around. "I don't know," I admitted, panic rising again. I fought against it and took a deep breath. "But we have to keep moving." As we continued our anxious trek, the shadows thickened, clinging to the edges of our vision. The street seemed endless, and with every step, the chill in the air grew heavier. A part of me felt it was a mistake to have come here, that maybe we should have stayed home where it was safe. Just then, I caught a glimpse of a shadow darting across the road behind us. It was low to the ground and slinking forward like a predator stalking its prey. "Did you see that?" I whispered urgently, but before anyone could respond, I felt a sharp tug at the back of my jacket. I spun around, my heart pounding, only to find nothing there. What was that? I managed to croak out, the fear tightening my chest. It must have been the wind, Lucy said, trying to sound calm, but I could see her hands shaking. I wanted to believe her, but the way the shadows twisted around us felt alive, as if they were toying with us, waiting for a moment of weakness. We quickened our pace now, glancing back constantly, but the further we went, the closer the shadows seemed to creep. To my growing horror, I realized they began to blend with our surroundings more and more. Every dark corner held a whisper, every flickering light felt menacing. Panic clawed at my throat, urging me to find safety somewhere, anywhere, away from this nightmare. As we rounded a corner, my breath caught in my throat. Ahead of us stood an old playground, rusted and forgotten. The swings creaked slowly, moving back and forth though there was no wind. It felt wrong, too still, too quiet. I don't like this place, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It looks spooky, one child whimpered as we approached, their wide eyes mirroring my trepidation. The tall slide loomed ominously, and the merry-go-round began to spin slightly, as if touched by the ghostly hands of a child long gone. I felt an uneasy sensation wash over me, like the playground was a trap waiting to ensnare us. Let's just go around it, I suggested, feeling every instinct warning me to turn back. But as soon as I started to turn, the laughter came again, echoing off the rusted metal of the playground. It was louder now, mocking and sinister, and I realized it wasn't from a child at all. You can't leave, it taunted, and I felt the shadows gathering, pressing against us like an unseen tide. We stood frozen, hearts racing as the laughter grew, spiraling into a cacophony of shrieks that reverberated in my ears. The playground felt alive, and I could see figures dancing in the shadows, flickering in and out like bad dreams. They were taunting us, calling us towards the depths of the twisted play equipment. We need to run now, I shouted, the words pouring out in a panic. But even as I said it, the shadows surged forward, swirling and reaching out, black tendrils grasping for us as if they were alive. I felt a cold grip close around my wrist, the icy fingers pulling me back into the dark. No, I screamed, twisting and yanking free, but the shadows grew stronger, their hunger palpable. Run? I yelled again, and it felt like an instinct, a primal call to survival. We turned and fled, tearing away from the haunt of the playground, our footsteps pounding against the ground as the laughter trailed behind us, a hollow echo drowning out our gasps. As we sprinted, the shadows pursued, clawing at our heels, wrapping around us like a suffocating blanket. Don't look back, I urged, trying to keep my focus on the distant streetlights ahead. I could feel their cold essence closing in, desperate to claim us. Ahead, I spotted a glimmering sign. It was the local store, a familiar landmark that sparked a flicker of hope. There. To the store, I shouted, urging everyone on. We surged toward it, lungs burning, hearts racing, desperation fueling our steps as the shadows lashed out behind us. Just when I thought we were safe, the door swung open by itself, creaking in the dark, screaming for us to enter. I glanced back one last time, and to my horror, I saw the shadows coalescing into shapes, figures that flickered from human forms to monstrous apparitions. They stretched their arms out, fingers elongating, as if inviting us into their dark embrace. Inside. Now. I yelled, feeling the overwhelming dread pushing at my back. We rushed through the door, tumbling inside as I slammed it shut. Behind us, the coldness of the shadows dissipating just a little. Panting, we huddled against the wall, our hearts pounding in unison as we tried to catch our breath. The store was eerily quiet, illuminated only by the faint overhead lights that hummed softly above us. But an unsettling stillness filled the air, the kind that makes your skin prickle. Just as I began to feel just a hint of reprieve, the low whispers returned. They wafted through the shelves like a chilling breeze, as if the shadows were following us, clawing to get in. You cannot hide from us, they taunted, their voices slithering through the stacks of products. What do they want? One child whispered, their eyes wide with fright. I don't know, I replied, my mind racing. But we can't let them find us. I scanned the store looking for somewhere to hide. The aisles were dark, shadows spilling around like thick ink, almost swallowing the light entirely. Let's go to the back, I suggested, pushing my fear aside. There might be a way out through the loading dock. We moved quietly through the aisles, hearts racing, stepping carefully as we tried to stay as silent as possible. The whispers grew louder, almost mocking us, swirling around us like a storm. You can't escape. You will be ours. I felt the shadows coiling in the air around us, tightening. Every shadowy corner felt like it was breathing, ready to reach out and pull us in. Just as we neared the back of the store, a loud bang rang out, causing us all to freeze. I turned slowly towards the sound, dread pooling in my stomach. Boxes had toppled over in the aisle, as if something had pushed them aside. A flicker of movement caught my eye, a shadow darting between the shelves, and I knew we had to hurry. "Come on. This way," I urged, my voice trembling as I took the lead toward the back door. But when we reached it, my heart sank. The door was locked, rusted and old, the handle barely budging under my grip. "Please no," I whispered desperately, trying to shake the handle. "Let's push it." We all shoved against the door with all our might, but it refused to budge, trapping us in this dark abyss. The whispers grew louder, becoming a cacophony of noise that filled my mind with fear. "You belong to us," they promised, the shadows wrapping tighter around the room. I could feel panic surging in my chest, the shadows pushing against the walls, rooting us to the spot. Suddenly, the front door burst open with a deafening crash. I nearly jumped out of my skin, turning to see the figure of the woman standing there, her hair wild and eyes glowing with anger. "You thought you could escape me?" she screeched, shadows swirling up her legs, climbing like lizards. "Run!" I yelled again, grabbing the hands of the kids around me. We turned to flee deeper into the store, desperate for escape as the shadows erupted around us. Just as we dashed toward the back, the lights began to flicker and go out one by one, plunging us into darkness. I gripped the children tightly, urging them forward as shadows closed in around us, dark tendrils reaching out to snatch us away. "Don't look back," I shouted, feeling a surge of determination. We had to reach safety, had to get away from this nightmare. The only sound that filled the air was our uneven breaths and the frantic pounding of our hearts. But as we ran, it felt like the floor was shifting beneath us. I stumbled, nearly losing my balance as I yanked a child forward, only to see the floor pulsing with shadow, twisting like something alive. "Go. Keep moving," I yelled as panic gripped my heart. We dashed through the racks, our feet pounding against the cold tiles, but just when I thought we might get away, I felt a freezing grip around my ankle. I screamed, looking down to see a dark hand wrapped around my leg, pulling me down. I kicked and struggled, managing to break free, but the shadows surged back, gathering at our feet like a thick fog. "We won't let you go," they insisted, their voices now a deep growl echoing through the room. I could feel time slipping away, the walls closing in, and my heart raced more than ever. "This way," I shouted, spotting a service exit at the far side of the store. "We have to reach it." I could feel the shadows swirling behind us, the weight of their darkness pushing down on our backs. With every ounce of strength, we raced toward that small sliver of hope. "Don't stop," I urged, willing them to match my speed as I neared the exit. The door was just within reach, my fingers brushing against the cool metal handle, hope coursing through me when I heard the chilling laugh again. "You can't run forever. You belong to the dark." I threw the door open with all my strength, stumbling out into the night as the children followed, panting and terrified. We burst into the cool air, but behind me, I could hear the shadows crashing against the frame, desperate to break through. Just when I thought we made it, I felt an unseen force pull at my shoulders. "No," I screamed, fighting against the cold grip. I could feel cold fingers wrapping around my throat, closer and closer, dragging me back into the void. "Help!" I cried, panic rising in my chest as I felt the world darkening around me. In the chaos, I could hear Lucy screaming, the other kids frantically pulling at my arms. "Hold on," she shouted, and it felt like a lifeline, her strength pulling me back. With my heart pounding in my chest, a sudden surge of determination filled me. "Don't let go." We pulled together, and with one last desperate push, I ripped free of the shadowy grasp just as the tendrils of darkness began to fade. I stumbled forward, falling to the grass as the shadows writhed in frustration, unable to follow us into the light. Panting, I looked back, the door now closed tightly, shadows clawing futilely against the surface. "We did it," I breathed, disbelief washing over me, but my relief became a distant thrill chased away by the new chill in the air. I glanced around, my heart still racing as the reality of our escape began to sink in. The night was still, unnaturally so, the only sound the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. But there was something off, an unsettling feeling that pulled at me. The darkness felt thicker now, like a living thing watching us, waiting. "Are we safe?" Lucy whispered, her voice quivering as she clutched my sleeve. I couldn't find the words to comfort her. Instead, I scanned our surroundings, trying to convince myself that we had truly escaped. But in the moonlight, shapes shifted in the trees, casting long, jagged shadows that seemed to loom over us. Maybe we should keep moving, I suggested, trying to sound firm. We can't just stay here. The kids nodded, following my lead as we walked along the deserted street, avoiding the dark patches where the light barely reached. My pulse quickened with every step. Each shadow felt like a twisted face grinning in wicked delight, just waiting for us to falter. The laughter from before echoed faintly in my mind, weaving through my determination. With trembling hands, I pulled the locket from beneath my shirt. The warmth that had been comforting before now flickered, almost like a heartbeat. This should help us, I thought, but doubt crept in. Was it strong enough to keep the shadows at bay? As we trudged forward, a low whisper drifted through the air, curling around my ears like smoke. You can't hide, you can't run. We are everywhere. The voice was familiar, sending a shiver down my spine as I realized it belonged to the woman. I gripped the locket tighter, willing the heat to grow, but it felt almost like it was fading. Moments later, a rustling sound came from behind us, the brush of something moving through the tall grass. I halted suddenly, turning back towards the noise. Did you hear that? I asked, fear tightening my chest. Maybe it's just an animal, one of the kids said, attempting to sound brave. But I knew better. This was not a simple creature of the night. The laughter flared up again, a cruel sort of melody that cut through the night air. It was closer now, echoing from the shadows, taunting us as we stood frozen in place. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on us. We need to keep moving, I urged, forcing my feet to move ahead. The kids followed, but I could feel their hesitation, the fear wrapping around them like a heavy blanket. Just then, a breeze swept through, colder than anything I had felt before, making me shiver. And then came the smell, thick and rotten, like decay mixed with something metallic. It wrapped around us, penetrating my senses, making me gag. What is that? I cried, my voice shaking. I peeked back over my shoulder and saw the shadows twisting together, merging and twisting into ominous shapes. Dark tendrils extended toward us, curling like a predator's claws reaching out, aiming to grab us. Each shadow seemed to breathe, pulsating in syncopation with our racing hearts. Run, everyone. Keep running. I screamed as we broke into a chaotic sprint. The pavement flew beneath us, each footfall echoing harshly through the night as the shadows pursued us, hungry and relentless. I could hear the whispers, louder now, creeping into my mind, breaking my concentration. You can't escape, they hissed, the words wrapping around me, pulling me down into despair. Every shadow seemed to reach out, grasping at my legs, trying to trip me, to steal me away. But I pressed on, adrenaline surging, pushing the fear away from my thoughts. Ahead, I saw flickering lights from a small diner. My heart raced as I realized we might find safety there. This way, I shouted, and we veered towards the light. I could hear the clanging of silverware inside, the sound of a few late-night patrons chatting. When we reached the diner, I hurled the door open, a rush of warmth flooding over us, but as soon as we stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. The chatter halted, heads turning to look at us, their eyes wide with disbelief. What happened? One of the waitresses asked, her voice quivering as she looked at our sweaty, terrified faces. The shadows, something is chasing us, I exclaimed, my breath coming out in ragged gasps. Before she could respond, the door slammed shut behind us. I turned just in time to see the shadows pooling around the threshold. Please help us, I begged, feeling the panic rise again. The diners began to whisper among themselves, fear tightening their faces. But then one old man stood up, his eyes dark and knowing. You've seen the shadows then? He said in a low voice as a shiver ran through the diner like an electric shock. They've been hungry for a long time. The darkness can't be ignored. Just then there was a loud bang making us all jump. The lights flickered above, casting erratic shadows on the walls. What do you mean? I asked, trying to mask my fear, but the old man just shook his head sadly. They take what they want, he said, his voice heavy with fear. They will not stop until they've claimed you. You must fight back, but even that may not be enough. I could feel the weight of those words pressing down on me. Outside, the laughter echoed louder, the mocking tones curling through the door like the breath of darkness itself. Suddenly, the windows began to rattle as the shadows swelled and pressed against them, the whispers growing more furious. You don't belong here, they screamed, frustration seeping through their haunting tones. We have to do something, I shouted, feeling the grip of panic boil over. They'll come for us. The old man nodded gravely. Find the light. The shadows fear the light. He motioned toward a closet at the back of the diner. There may still be a lantern in there. Use it to face your fears. Without thinking, I dashed towards the closet, praying it wouldn't be too late. The door creaked open, revealing a dim storage area filled with old pots and cleaning supplies. I began rummaging through the items, my heart pounding as shadows danced ominously in the corners. Finally, my fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. I pulled it out, revealing a dusty lantern, its glass cracked but still intact. "I found it," I yelled, holding it high as I rushed back to the main area. Meanwhile, the shadows outside slammed against the glass, causing a sickening thud. "Let us in," they shrieked, voices merging into a disturbing chorus of chaos. I quickly rushed to the old man and the others gathered there, breathing hard. "How do I get it to work?" I asked frantically. "Fuel it first," he said, pointing toward an oil canister on a shelf nearby. I quickly grabbed it and poured oil into the lantern, careful not to spill. As I struck a match and held it to the wick, the flame burst to life, throwing warm light around the diner. The shadows outside recoiled, the flames dancing along the walls and illuminating every corner. "Now," the old man shouted, panic in his eyes. "Use it to push back the darkness. Face them." With a surge of courage, I stepped toward the door, lantern raised high. "You will not take us," I called, my voice steady despite the fear. The shadows clawed at the barrier, fierce and angry, but as the light spilled from the lantern, they began to falter. I felt an electric charge in the air, the shadows splitting and pulling away from the fierce flame. "Back to the dark," I commanded, lifting the lantern higher. I focused all my fear and determination into the light, every memory of the chase pushing me forward. With all my might, I moved toward the door, the glowing flame radiating warmth that blasted against the darkness, forcing it back, illuminating the night with a golden hue. The laughter transformed into howls of rage-filled desperation, the shadows writhing in agony, retreating deeper into the night as I stepped forward. "Keep pushing. Don't stop," I urged, feeling the kids rally behind me. Together, we created a defensive line, the flame illuminating our path. "Stay together," I reminded them as we marched forward, the light blazing brightly. Gradually, the shadows shrank back, their forms retracting into nothingness. Yet just as we thought victory was in our grasp, a piercing scream erupted from the darkness. I spun around, eyes wide. "There's still one left," I yelled, my heart racing again. Out from the inky blackness, the figure of the woman emerged, her expression twisted into an inhuman rage. "You think this will save you?" she screeched, the shadows swirling around her like a cloak. I raised the lantern higher, my breath quickening. "I won't let you take us. I won't let you win." With all my strength, I pointed the lantern toward her, focusing all my energy on the light flooding from it. "Back to where you came from," I demanded. The air crackled, the boundaries between light and dark warping as the confrontation intensified. Flames flickered wildly, casting a brilliant glow that seemed to sap the dark force of its strength. The woman screeched again, her face contorted with fury as the shadows began to peel away, unraveling like mist caught in a breeze. The ground trembled beneath our feet, as if the very earth was reeling from the battle. "Together," I called to the kids, hoping they would find courage in my voice. "We have to focus." With a surge of energy, every child joined in, holding hands around me, channeling our fear into shared determination. The lantern pulsed with light, growing brighter, pushing the shadows further back as we chanted an unspoken promise to resist the darkness. "Let it in," the old man shouted, voice ringing clear. "Let the light reclaim its rightful place." As shadows writhed against the solid glow, I felt a bond form between us, lifting my spirits and pushing me forward, sensing that together we could vanquish this dark force once and for all. In that moment, the night sky above us seemed to sparkle with stars, illuminating our way to push through this fear. And as we stood resolute, light flickering fiercely against the encroaching darkness, we began to reclaim our power, ready to face whatever darkness lay ahead. We were not alone. Each heartbeat pulsed as one, aligning our fears against the shadows that tried to claim us. Suddenly, almost in tandem, the shadows began to dissipate, retreating like smoke against the dawn light. The woman let out a final, blood-curdling scream, and in an instant she was gone, the shadows following her, melting back into the night. I could hardly believe it. The air felt lighter, and the laughter that had once haunted us faded into the past. As the last shreds of darkness vanished, we all stood wide-eyed, a mix of disbelief and triumph washing over us. "Did we really do it?" Lucy gasped, looking around at our disheveled group. I could hardly catch my breath, still holding the lantern high. "I think we did," I whispered, feeling the warm light of hope flood through me. But deep down I knew this wasn't over, not really. The shadows may have retreated, but the darkness always waits, waiting for a chance to return. And as we stepped back into the light, I couldn't shake the feeling that our encounter with them was far from finished, even though we found a moment of relief. The lantern flickered as I took a deep breath, the shadows having momentarily retreated, but I could still feel the weight of the darkness lingering in the air. It wrapped around me like an unwanted blanket, and every passing moment made me realize how easy it could be for them to come back. Glancing at the kids, I saw a mix of both relief and fear reflected in their eyes. "Are you all right?" I asked, trying to sound brave. They nodded slowly, but I could tell they were still shaken, trembling slightly like frightened leaves. Just as I was about to suggest we leave the diner, a chilling breeze gusted through the entrance, making the hair on my arms stand on end. The door creaked open slowly, almost as if inviting something sinister back into the warmth we had just claimed. "Close that," the old man shouted, his voice tense with urgency. I rushed toward the door, feeling an unsettling chill crawl up my spine. But before I could shut it, I caught sight of movement outside. The shadows were swirling again, gathering in an almost sentient way, curling around each other like a cloud of smoke. I froze, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. It felt like they were taking shape, reforming into something even more terrifying than before. "We can't let them back in," I yelled, determination flooding my veins. The air rippled with energy and I swung the door shut, locking it tight. But just as I did, I heard a low, sinister chuckle echoing from the shadows. I turned to the kids. "Stay close," I commanded, and we huddled together, gripping each other's arms in solidarity. Tension ran thick in the air as we all stared at the door, waiting and listening. Then came the scratching sound, persistent and unnerving, like nails dragging against wood. "Let us in," the whispers beckoned, clear and haunting, each word sent shivers down my spine. It felt like they were probing our minds, searching for our hidden fears, the things that would break our resolve. A moment later, the lights flickered again, casting eerie shadows around the diner. All at once, the mismatched furniture and walls began to twist and morph. The diner felt as if it was breathing with a life of its own, the familiar turning strange. Another loud bang rattled the windows and panic surged through me. "They found a way," I gasped, adrenaline kicking in. My eyes darted around the room, looking for something, anything we could use to defend ourselves. "We need more light," I shouted, hands trembling around the lantern. The old man stepped forward, speaking quickly. "If there's a way to distract them, it could give us time." He motioned toward the kitchen. "The employees used to keep flashlights back there. It might help us spread the light." With quick nods of agreement, I hurried toward the kitchen, pulling the door open. Inside, the shadows danced even more, crawling along the walls, threatening to envelop the room. I grabbed a flashlight from a shelf, my hands shaking as I switched it on. The bright beam cut through the dimness, but it felt weak against the looming darkness outside. "Bring more," I shouted back to the kids. "We need every light we can find." They rushed in after me, scouring the room for anything that could help. As I moved deeper into the kitchen, the air became heavier, thick with an unsettling fog that tasted sour in my mouth. I felt as if I wasn't alone anymore, a presence shifting just beyond the corner of my eye. "Look out," Lucy yelled, and I turned just in time to see a shadow darting toward us, slick and dark, trying to slip through the crack under the door. Panic washed over me. I quickly focused the flashlight on that area, the beam brightening as it met the shadow. It hissed, recoiling as if burned, retreating back into the abyss, a thin thread of darkness receding from the light. I held the beam steady, feeling the battle within me intensify. "Let's go. We need to push this light to the front." We rushed back, arms clutching flashlights and the lantern, racing to create a wall of light. As we reached the diner's main area, the atmosphere shifted again. The shadows were clawing at the walls now, dark fingers stretching toward us, curving under the tables and trying to wrap around our feet. "Make a circle," I yelled, desperate to unite our strength. The kids rushed to form a ring, shining their lights together, beams colliding, creating a pulsating field of warmth around us. As we stood in unison, the whispers grew louder, a rancid cacophony rippling through the air. "You cannot escape. You belong to the dark." They shrieked in the chorus, each voice rising over the other, intertwining in a sinister melody that clawed at my resolve. With a feeling of dread, I looked toward the door, which was now shifting as if something had begun to seep through. The old man stood beside me, his face pale and etched with worry. "We must not show fear," he said through gritted teeth, but I could see even he struggled against the growing tide of darkness. In defiance, I yelled out, "We stand together. We won't let you take us." The words echoed with newfound power, vibrating in the air as if to awaken every bit of courage within us. As if in response, the shadows surged, thick and dark, rushing toward us like a living wave. The entire diner rattled, plates clattering, the lights flickering intensely as the shadows pressed against our glowing circle. But with a fierce determination gnawing at my core, I aimed the lantern directly at the door. "This ends now," I shouted, the flame casting a brilliant light that reached deep into the shadows. I felt the warmth seep back into my veins, igniting every ounce of courage I had left. The walls echoed with the sound of 1,000 voices screaming in anger, the shadows undulating like a storm. "You cannot escape your fate," they howled, the words distorting mid-air, mixing with hissing breaths that slithered around us. In that moment, something deep inside me awakened, a strange and ancient strength. I could feel it building, bubbling and surging like a tidal wave. "Fight!" I screamed, locking eyes with each child, feeling our combined energy charging through the air. As we concentrated, the light shone brighter, illuminating every corner, and I could see the shadows writhe and pull back, as if the very light was forcing them to retreat. We were no longer just driven by fear. We were fueled by the resolve that we would not be taken again. "Push forward," I yelled, and together we moved toward the door, shining our lights in unison, creating an impenetrable barrier of light that pressed outward. The shadows screamed and twisted, dark forms shriveling back from the onslaught as we advanced. I felt the surge of power behind me growing with every step we took. But just as it seemed we were winning, I caught sight of something out of place. In the corner of the womb, tangled in the shadows, lay a dark object, almost pulsating with malevolence. My breath caught in my throat. It looked like a small box, carved with disturbing symbols and an aura of dread. "What is that?" I gasped, the distraction momentarily pulling my focus. "It is a relic of the darkness, long forgotten," the old man said, realization dawning in his eyes. "It contains what they want to consume." With horror I understood. They wanted to reclaim what had once been theirs. They were fighting not just for us, but to take back that object which I now suspected had the power to control them. My heart raced as I felt the shadows gather once more, snapping back to the box as if drawn by its sinister pull. "We must destroy it," I shouted, pointing toward it with desperate urgency. As the shadows twisted wildly, I felt an intense fear come back for a moment. But there was no time to waste. "We have to do this together." The fleeting doubt melted away, and I charged forward, extending the light from the lantern and my flashlight towards the box. "Come on," I urged the others. "We need to get rid of this thing." With the group rallying behind me, we aimed every beam of light at the box. As the radiant light met the symbols engraved on the surface, the box began to radiate darkness, pulsing with a life of its own as if it were fighting back. Suddenly, the whispers turned desperate, rising to a deafening roar. "No, you can't do this." They were frantic and wild, struggling against the onslaught of our combined light. But I pushed harder, every fiber of my being focused on that cursed box. "You have no power here," I yelled. The shadows swirled violently, but our light burned brighter, illuminating the very darkness attempting to claim us. My heart thundered in my chest as the vibrations from our lights reached a peak, the box trembling in response. "Break it. We need to break it," the old man urged, his voice full of urgency. With renewed resolve, I dove forward, slamming the lantern against the box with all my strength. A blinding light filled the room, a scorching surge of energy bursting forth as the impacts collided, and for a moment I could see everything. The shadows recoiling, the light pushing through, wrapping around me like a protective barrier. Then, in an explosion of light and sound, the box shattered, sending dark fragments scattering throughout the diner, dull whispers replaced by a shrill wail. The shadows screamed in agony as they dissipated into nothingness, entirely consumed by the brilliance of our light. Time seemed to slow as light engulfed the place, every inch revealing a new aura of hope and warmth. The darkness shrank, unraveling like a frayed thread. I closed my eyes against the glow, a sudden weight lifting off my soul as I felt an inexplicable sense of calm. When I finally opened them, the diner was transformed. The sinister fog that had threatened to cling to us was gone, replaced by a bright golden glow. I looked at the kids, their expressions reflecting a mix of disbelief and joy. "We did it," Lucy whispered, tears of relief spilling down her cheeks. "Yeah," I smiled, realizing it was true. We had not only fought off the shadows but destroyed the very thing that had given them power. But deep down, I knew a part of me remained on alert, sensing that this was just a battle, not the war. As we stepped back into the well-lit room, I couldn't shake the feeling of something lingering, watching us, waiting in the dark corners of my mind. With newfound courage, I made a silent vow. We had faced the darkness, but the shadows may always be there, waiting for another chance to creep back into our lives. And while I hoped the lantern's light would guide us, I knew the fight was far from over. As we stepped away from the chaos, I couldn't help but glance back, half expecting the darkness to return, but all that met my gaze was the sweet, gentle light. Yet, in the corners, a flicker of shadow still lingered, and a whisper echoed low in my mind, reminding me of the battle that could await us in the future. The flicker of shadow still lingered, and a whisper echoed low in my mind, reminding me of the battle that could await us in the future. I shook my head, trying to clear away the creeping doubt. "We need to stick together," I urged the kids, glancing at their relieved but worried faces. "Let's get outside. We should be in the open, where we can see everything." The door felt heavy as I reached for it, almost resisting my touch. I turned the knob, hearing a soft click, but part of me hesitated, anxiously thinking of what might be lurking on the other side. Finally, I pushed it open. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie silver glow over everything. As we stepped out, I noticed the ground was disturbed, like something had been dragged through the dirt. Deep grooves carved into the earth led away from the diner, twisting off into the darkness. "Do you see that?" I whispered, pointing to the strange marks that disappeared into the woods. The kids followed my gaze, apprehension creeping back. "We should follow them," Peter said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if someone needs help?" A heavy silence fell over us, complete uncertainty in the air. "But what if it's a trap?" I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine as the shadows around us seemed to pulse and breathe. "I want to find out." "We can't just leave it," Lucy insisted, determination hardening her voice. I sighed, torn between fear and the need to understand what lay beneath the surface. "I guess if we go, we have to stay close," I said at last, prompting nods from the others. With lantern still in hand, I took a deep breath and stepped forward, the others close behind. We moved cautiously, the world around us quiet except for the crunch of fallen leaves beneath our feet. Every creak and rustle made me flinch, my senses heightened, and my heart raced as we ventured deeper into the woods. The trees loomed ominously, their branches twisting against the moonlight, creating shadows that felt alive. Suddenly, a shrill scream pierced the silence, echoing through the trees, setting my heart racing. "What was that?" I gasped, frozen in place as the sound faded into an unsettling stillness. "I don't know," whispered Sarah, her face pale. "But we should go back." "I can't just leave it," I replied, adrenaline coursing through me. "If someone's in trouble, we have to help." Despite my own fear, I pressed on, feeling drawn to the sound. As we followed the eerie trail, I felt as though unseen eyes were watching us, lurking just beyond the light. The scratching sounds returned, this time growing closer, clinging to the trees like tendrils reaching for us. Suddenly, I caught sight of a flash of movement up ahead. "Did you see that?" I pointed, squinting into the darkness. Before anyone could answer, it darted away, leaving a ripple of shadows behind it, blending seamlessly with the night. My stomach twisted as panic set in. "What was it?" Peter asked, his voice shaking. "Let's keep moving," I said, trying to sound confident. "Maybe it's leading us to whoever screamed." As we walked on, I felt a growing sense of dread, the shadows shifting and swirling like dark smoke around us. The trees seemed to close in, the air thickening with an oppressive weight, filling my lungs with cold fear. The whispers returned, brushing against my ears like ghostly fingers. Turn back," they cautioned, weaving through the leaves. "Do you hear that?" Sarah's voice trembled. "It sounds like a warning?" I finished, glancing around, desperate to see something, anything of reassurance. Just then we stumbled into a small clearing, and at its center was a strange sight. A circle of stones, ancient and imposing, surrounded an open space. In the middle lay a small, dark figure, a person, or at least it looked like one. "Is that?" Lucy hesitated, clutching my arm tightly. Fear seeped into every syllable. "I don't know," I said, stepping closer, feeling the lantern's light quiver against the odd shadows that enveloped the figure. As I approached, the figure seemed to stir, and a cold breeze whooshed through the clearing, whipping around us like a warning. "Help me," it rasped, the sound chilling as it echoed in the night. I felt the ground beneath shift slightly, almost as if the earth was breathing. "Stay back," I shouted, though I had no idea what this figure truly was. But something about it felt wrong. Suddenly, its head snapped up, revealing gaunt features and hollow eyes that stared into my soul. "Help me," It murmured again, voice echoing with a chilling, otherworldly cadence, the shadows clinging tighter around it. A jolt of terror raced through me, my instincts screamed to run. "We can't," I urged, looking back at the kids. "We don't know what it is." The figure began to rise, the shadows stretching out like fingers toward us, trying to claw into the light we had brought with us. "You must join me, join us," it hissed, the voices blending together into a haunting melody of despair. I felt the air thicken, my chest tightening as the shadows flowed closer, feeding off the fear in my heart. "Get the lantern higher," I yelled, panic lacing my voice. With a shared, silent understanding, we raised the lantern and flashlights, beams dancing against the shadows. "Stay back," I demanded, pushing the light towards the figure. In response, it shrieked, a heart-stopping sound that shattered the night, echoing off every tree. For a moment, I felt the world wobble, and the ground beneath me trembled as if it was shifting in fear. "Turn back." The whispers rose to a deafening cacophony, swirling around us, and the ground cracked open slightly, revealing dark chasms that seemed to beckon. I took one step back, then two. "We need to leave. Now," I shouted, adrenaline flooding my body as I turned to run. The others followed closely behind, panic reflecting in their eyes, the haunting shrieks of the figure chasing us through the trees, taunting, desperate. "Keep running," I urged, the lantern swinging wildly, casting frantic light over roots and rocks as we dashed back the way we came. The shadows tried to cling, grasping at our legs but falling short as we broke free into the open. But the clearing was no longer empty. Our path back was blocked by a circle of dark figures, eyes glinting under the moonlight, positioned menacingly around the edge. It felt like they had appeared out of thin air, their hollow forms flickering like dying embers, evoking an ancient terror we couldn't explain. Surrounding us, Sarah whimpered, and the dread gripped my heart tighter. "This way," I shouted, breaking left, run straight for the distant glow of the diner. But as we ran, the air changed again, thickening, becoming almost suffocating as the figures closed in behind us. "You belong to the dark," their voices echoed, cold and haunting, teasing laughter weaving through the whisper of the wind. We pushed harder, fatigue setting in but panic fueling our flight. The lantern flickered, its light growing dim, surrounded by an ocean of shadows that threatened to swallow us whole. But I could feel the strength of our bond, a flicker of hope in the darkest of places. If we stood together, perhaps we could withstand the night, face whatever awaited us with heads high. Still, as the figures advanced, I couldn't shake the chill creeping down my spine. What if darkness had a real plan? What if this was just the beginning of something far more sinister? "Keep moving faster," I urged, desperately seeking the safety of that warm light, the diner waiting to embrace us hopefully one last time. But when I glanced over my shoulder, the figures melded into the shadows, their whispers growing closer, morphing into an unsettling chorus that promised we would never escape. I understood then, this battle was far from over, and a sense of dread settled in my stomach like a heavy stone. Whatever happened next, I knew we would have to fight. The shadows were relentless, and though the night felt endless, we were just beginning to uncover the truth about the darkness that haunted us. I understood then, this battle was far from over, and a sense of dread settled in my stomach like a heavy stone. Whatever happened next, I knew we would have to fight. As we ran, I could feel the suffocating darkness closing in. Each breath I took felt heavier, almost as if the very air was filled with shadows trying to choke the light out of me. The whispers hounded us from behind, sounding closer with every step we took. "You cannot escape," they taunted, that chilling voice echoing in my mind. It felt like the darkness had teeth, gnashing against the very fibers of my soul. "Don't look back," I cried out, forcing my gaze to the path ahead. But the words barely made it past my lips when I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind us, their rhythm matching ours perfectly. Every time I squinted into the murky night, I saw flickers of movement, dark figures darting between the trees, weaving through the shadows like ghostly phantoms pursuing their prey. "Faster," I urged, my heart pounding louder than the sound of our fleeing feet. Fear surged through my veins, fueling my instinct to push harder, to reach the safety of the diner before it was too late. The flickering lantern barely lit the way, sending tremors of uncertainty through me. Would we make it out? Or would the darkness wrap its cold fingers around us, pulling us into its suffocating embrace? As we pressed on, the ground beneath us turned uneven, littered with roots that seemed to grasp at our legs like desperate hands. The feeling of being hunted clawed at me, and I could almost feel the warmth of breath on my neck as I imagined the figures closing in. "Over there," Lucy shouted, pointing to a break in the trees. My gaze followed hers, and in the distance, I could see the glimmer of the diner's lights. A beacon of hope. But a low, guttural growl vibrated through the air, freezing us on the spot. My blood turned to ice. What was that? I whispered, hardly able to get the words out. The growl rolled again, low and menacing, sending shivers cascading down my spine. The diner's welcoming glow seemed to dim under its weight, swallowed whole by the encroaching shadows. We need to move now, I yelled, urgency coursing through my voice. The growl turned into a chorus of shrieks, piercing through the trees like knives. Each sound rippled through the air, bouncing off the trunks and wrapping around us, twisting our resolve. The kids stumbled, their faces pale as the shadows stretched toward us like a dark tide. Without knowing how, I felt a surge of fear rise in me, a need to protect them, to shield them from whatever monsters were lurking. Stay close, I barked, leading the way as we plunged into a thicket of overgrown bushes, trying to find our path back to the diner. But the bushes seemed to close in as we pushed through, branches clawing at us like perishing hands, pulling at our clothes and scratching at our skin. I could hear the whispers growing louder, curling into my ears. You cannot hide from us. Keep moving, I urged, squeezing through the tight space. My skin crawled, beastly fingers trailing along my arms, making my skin feel alive, tingling with every scrape. I could feel the presence in the forest, watching, waiting, hungry for us to falter. Finally, we broke free from the thicket, but stumbled into another clearing. Instead of relief, dread slammed back into me. In the center stood an old swing set, rusty and worn, creaking eerily as the wind brushed against it. A thick fog began to roll in, wrapping around the swings, weaving through the chains as if the very air carried a chilling memory. Why is this here? Peter whispered, his eyes wide with fear. I don't know, I replied, feeling a deep unease seep into my bones. But it doesn't feel right. An icy chill ran down my spine, the whispers circling around us, more frantic now. Play with us, join us. Suddenly, the swing began to sway back and forth on its own, creaking violently even without a breeze. I backed away, my eyes fixed on it as horror knotted in my stomach. Get back, I shouted as I grabbed the lantern tighter, its flickering light the only barrier between us and the growing shadows. But just then, the air thickened with a darkness so tangible, it felt like we were swimming through mud. And as the fog thickened, I spotted them. Tiny shapes began to emerge, small children no older than we were, their faces pale and eyes hollow, filled with a sorrow that made my heart ache. Help us, they whispered, their voices soft and haunting, carrying an unsettling harmony. We want to play. Don't listen to them, I yelled, turning to the others. They're not real, they're traps. But even as I said that, the slight tug at my heart pulled me closer, their innocent faces beckoning me. The figure on the swing giggled, its head tilting to the side in a sickening manner. Join us. It's fun. Turn away. We have to go now, I screamed, summoning every ounce of strength to pull the others back. As we turned to run, the fog thickened, pressing against us like an unseen force, and the children's laughter echoed behind us, a chilling reminder of what we were leaving behind. You can't leave. You belong with us now, they sang, a haunting melody that clawed at my resolve. Each step felt like a battle, the ground pulling at my feet, trying to keep me anchored to the nightmare. The shadows flared, reaching out, desperate to latch onto our fear and turmoil. I could hear the rustle of branches, something moving fast through the dark, chasing us, stalking our progress. Come on, I shouted, shoving my way through the underbrush, pushing back against the weight of the darkness wrapping around us. Every ounce of fear screamed within me as the trees started closing in again, their branches groaning, reaching toward us with claw-like fingers. Suddenly, a flash of light caught my eye, a faint glimmer much brighter than our lantern. The diner? I yelled, hope igniting in my chest. We raced forward, adrenaline flooding my veins, pushing the terror to the back of my mind. The shadows swirled angrily behind us, the whispers turning into a furious howl, and I felt the darkness trying to clamp down and pull us back. Just then, out of nowhere, something scurried across the path in front of us, a shadowy blur that seemed to move far too fast. I let out a terrified gasp as I slammed to a stop, the others halting beside me, confusion clouded by fear. What was that? Sarah panted, eyes wide. Before I could respond, the fog thickened once more, wrapping around us like a heavy curtain, and the growling returned, lower this time, rumbling through the ground beneath our feet. I felt as if the earth itself was alive with anger, shifting and groaning as something emerged from the shadows, something impossibly big and monstrous. Heart racing, I forced myself to take a step back, but the diner's lights flickered in my vision, a siren call in the cold night. "We can't give up. Light is right there," I urged, but my voice trembled, the tension palpable in the air. And then I saw it, a mass of limbs twisting and writhing, oozing with darkness, blending with the very shadows that surrounded it. I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing as the creature's eyes glowed a sickly yellow, locking eyes with mine, sending a jolt of terror spiraling through me. It let out a haunting shriek that sent vibrations deep into my bones, something that sounded human yet utterly wrong. I felt its hunger, a darkness that extended toward us, pulling, clawing at our very essence. The whispers roared with excitement. "They're here. They're here. Run." I screamed, bursting into action again, not wanting to witness what would happen if we stayed. The others followed, a cacophony of hurried footsteps pounding against the ground, hearts racing like wild drums in our chests, the night pressing down around us, determined to pull us into its depths. With every ounce of remaining strength, I pushed us through the swirling fog, desperate to reach the safety of the diner. I didn't look back, fear clawing at my mind as the growls and laughs blended into a ghastly symphony of despair, growing louder with every step we took. But the beacon of light became our obsession now, an anchor pulling us through the storm. Finally, we burst through the last line of shadows, the wooden door of the diner in sight, glowing like a golden promise at the end of a dark tunnel. I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing down behind us, chasing, relentless, ready to swallow us whole. Just as I reached out to grab the doorknob, a hand shot out from the shadows, seizing my wrist with a grip so cold it burned. I screamed, trying to shake it off, but the tendrils of darkness wrapped around me, their strength overpowering. "You cannot escape," the voices howled, drawing me back toward the dark abyss. "No, no," I cried, panic surging through me as I fought against the hold, struggling to break free. With a surge of desperation, I threw my weight against the door, pushing against the icy grip. "Get inside," I yelled, urging the others on as I fought with everything I had. In one final effort, I yanked my arm away, breaking free from the shadow's grasp, and hurled myself through the door just as it swung open. I felt a warmth envelop me as I stumbled inside, groups of flickering lights and the heavy scent of old coffee rushing back, a stark contrast to the darkness we had just escaped. But even as I caught my breath, my heart hammering in my chest, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't done yet. The shadows danced just outside the doorway, dark tendrils slipping through the crack as the whispers continued. "You will never be free. We will return." I turned to face the kids, fear reflected in each of their wide-eyed expressions. "What was that thing?" Lucy asked, shaking with a mix of shock and adrenaline. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice trembling. "But we have to be ready. We need to figure out how to stop it for good." And even as the diner's lights glimmered, the shadows seemed to lurk closer than ever, reminding me that night was far from over. I glanced at the others, their faces drawn tight with fear. I could feel an unsettling vibe hanging in the air, as if the diner itself was aware of the darkness closing in around us, awaiting our next move. The familiar sounds of clinking dishes and muffled conversations were muffled, swallowed by a thick fog of anxiety. "We can't stay here long," I said, scanning the room. A group of old men sat in the corner, their heads bowed low, lost in some muted conversation that felt wrong. It was like they were discussing things they shouldn't be, secrets that twisted the ordinary into something dark and sinister. "We need a plan." "Plan?" Sarah echoed, her voice shaking like a leaf. "What kind of plan can we make against that?" As I watched the thick fog outside creep ever closer, I felt a wave of dread wash over me. The diner's bright neon sign flickered, struggling against the encroaching shadows. "Whatever those things are, I'm sure they won't give up that easily," I replied, my mind racing with thoughts. The older man in the corner suddenly lifted his head, his eyes shining like hollow lanterns. "You can't run from them," he croaked, his voice raspy and cold as if he'd been lost in the darkness for far too long. "They know how to find you even in the light." "What do you mean?" I shouted, my heart pounding harder. "Who are they?" A strange smile appeared on his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. "They come in the night, drawn to fear. They feed on it little by little. The more you resist, the stronger they grow." Tension spread like wildfire among us. "We don't have time for this," I snapped, desperation clawing at my throat. "We have to do something." Then, without warning, the diner doors slammed shut. The force rattled the entire building, plates clinking together, and I jumped back, my heart nearly stopping. The old man chuckled, an unsettling sound that curdled my blood. "You're in their world now. There's no escape. What do we do?" Lucy whispered, looking around, her eyes wide like saucers. The windows? I shouted, racing toward one, the feeling in my gut urging me to do something, anything. I threw myself against the glass, pulling the curtains back, but the fog outside had thickened to a dense wall. Nothing could be seen beyond it. Just swirling darkness, alive and pulsing like some malevolent being. I quickly turned back to the others. We need to barricade the doors. We have to protect ourselves by some time. As we scrambled to find chairs and tables to block the exits, a low growl rumbled through the diner, chilling me to the bone. I paused, glancing back toward the one sitting quietly in the corner, but they hadn't moved. Their eyes were wide, fixated on the darkness outside, as if they could see something I couldn't. Do you think they're? I started, but the growl grew louder, vibrating through the floor and sending a chill cascading over me. The diner shook like it was alive, and then the growl shifted into a symphony of horrid laughter, chilling and mocking. I threw a couple of chairs against the door, the sound echoing sharply through the silence. Hurry? I urged, feeling panic rising like a tide in my throat. The laughter got louder, sharper, like jagged glass cutting through the air. Just then, the lights flickered again, plunging us into darkness for a heartbeat, and I felt the shadows climbing up the walls, inching closer to where we stood. My breath quickened, panic threatening to overwhelm me completely. As the lights returned, I saw that the old men were now standing, their heads tilted, their eyes filled with that haunting hunger. They were no longer just men. They had transformed into something grotesque, bodies jerking and twitching in unnatural ways. Join us, they whispered, the words hissing like serpents. The glimpse of their twisted bodies sent a jolt of terror through me. Get away, I shouted, fighting the instinct to turn and flee. I knew what their intentions were. The shadows behind them churned eagerly, hungry for the fear we tried to hide. Run? I yelled, breaking for the kitchen door, dragging the others with me. The growl evolved into a deafening roar, shaking the very foundation of the diner as we burst through into the back room. The kitchen was cluttered and dim, pots and pans hanging from the ceiling, casting eerie shadows that danced like phantoms. I could feel the shadows creeping, following closely behind us. What now? I gasped, struggling to catch my breath. Look, Sarah shouted, pointing to a window at the far end of the room. It was smaller, but it looked more accessible than anything else. Let's move, I urged, grabbing the first thing I could find, a heavy iron skillet, just in case we encountered more than shadows. We raced toward the window, but the noise behind us grew louder, an angry swell of chaos blaring like a storm. Just then, one of the twisted old men broke through the door, body swaying grotesquely. Its mouth opened wide, revealing jagged teeth, and it lunged toward us with unsettling speed. Climb. Now, I screamed, pushing Lucy toward the window, adrenaline pouring through my veins like fire. I swung the skillet, catching the figure square in the jaw, hearing the satisfying crack as it staggered back. Go, go, I yelled, banging against the window's frame as I struggled to open it. With a sickening creak, it finally gave way, revealing the hungry night air outside. A series of unnatural growls and hisses echoed from the kitchen doorway as more shadows began to flood in. The others scrambled behind me, fear fueling their speed. With a quick shove, I helped Lucy through the window, her feet scrambling for purchase outside. Quick, get outside, I urged, pulling Peter next and hearing the growls intensify. I glanced back, my heart sinking as I saw the old man begin to rise again, those eyes filled with a terrible longing, stretching from the shadows. Come on, I yelled, pushing Peter through the window just as the figure lunged again. I barely squeezed through before it grabbed at my ankle, teeth snapping dangerously close. Get off, I kicked out, feeling a rush of pleasure when my foot connected. I tumbled out the window, landing hard on the cold ground, my breath knocked out of me. The others were already backing away, casting frantic glances behind us as we scrambled to our feet. We need to run, I shouted, scanning the night around us. The diner loomed dark and ominous behind us, the shadows pouring out like smoke, twisting and turning into terrifying shapes. The growl rose again, a guttural sound spilling out into the night, a warning that we weren't safe yet. We stumbled forward, needing to escape that haunting place, heading toward the road that led back to the town. As we ran, I looked back, seeing the shadows begin to coil around the diner, taking form as they melted into the edges. The outliness of those twisted men grew more defined with every step we took, and I steeled myself against what was happening. Why won't they stop? Sarah gasped, running beside me, the panic palpable in her voice. Because they want us, I said, feeling the fear seep deeper, but I couldn't show it. We have to keep moving. We sprinted down the gravel road, the sound of our footsteps like drumbeats in the silence. But every time I looked back, I could see the shadows creeping closer, relentless and hungry, making my heart race. Past the tree line, the moonlight streamed like a beacon, cutting through the fog as we approached the outskirts of town. I felt a nagging fear in my gut. What if they followed us? What if they were lying in wait for us to grow tired, to give in to the fear? In the distance, I caught the flicker of lights, street lamps lining the main road. I ran ahead, desperate for safety, urging the others to keep up. We have to make it to town. But then, as I turned back to check on the group, dread twisted my stomach. Just out of the tree line, the shadows flowed like water, their forms shifting and slithering in ways that didn't make sense. The laughter returned, hauntingly sweet, echoing in the cold night air. Run. Don't look back. I shouted again, pushing forward as they began to stretch toward us, eager to snatch us back into their embrace. The warmth of the streetlights flickered ahead, hope teasing me to push harder. I could taste it. In seconds we would escape this nightmare. But as the last remnants of the forest fell behind, the shadows surged forward like a wave. I felt their breath on my neck, cold and clammy, like ice seeping into my bones. I focused on reaching the lights. With every step, the whispers grew louder, filling my ears with their taunting chorus. Join us in the dark. And then everything exploded into chaos. A sound like cracking thunder rang out, the very earth trembling beneath us. A blast of energy surged through the air, causing the streetlights to flutter violently before flicking out completely. I stumbled in the sudden darkness, scrambling to regain my balance as I heard the terrible screeching roar of the shadows, cascading all around us, the very air alive with an otherworldly rage. Then came the laughter again, wild, chilling laughter that sent waves of horror through me. Heart racing, I searched for any sign of refuge in the crushing darkness. My instincts screamed at me to run, but that sound, it dug deep into my mind, filling me with that gut-wrenching fear. Stick together, I yelled into the dark. We can find our way back. As we pressed on, desperately searching for a way forward, the laughter intensified, contorting into cruel taunts that sent chills through my veins. I could feel the shadows closing in, a serpentine force wrapping around us, crushing any hope of escape. With every beat of my heart, the darkness surrounded us. I didn't look back anymore. All I could focus on was the stamina in my legs, the sounds of my friends breathing closely beside me, the only tether to sanity amid the chaos. But even as I ran, I knew we had become part of their game. The night was not finished with us yet. It was just warming up, and we were trapped in the depths of fear, a living nightmare that felt endless, a darkness ever hungry for our light. I could barely hear my friends behind me anymore. The rush of breath and pounding footsteps faded into the cacophony of laughter and growls surrounding us. Every flicker of movement in the shadows made my heart leap, but I forced myself to focus, to keep pushing forward, despite the terror eating at my insides. Stay close. I called out, but my voice felt weak, swallowed by the tumultuous darkness. I looked ahead, searching for any hint of light, any sign that we were getting closer to escape. And then, just ahead, I spotted a faint glow, a street lamp flickering with hesitant golden light, like a candle fighting against the wind. Over there, I yelled, and with renewed urgency we surged toward it. Each step felt like a race against time and fear, shadows lunging at our backs, eager to drag us back into their abyss. But with every determined stride, I could feel our resolve building, fueling our desperate push toward safety. As we neared the street lamp, the shadows writhed around it, a swirling darkness refusing to let us pass. The air grew thick and heavy, crackling with an energy that made my skin crawl. I slowed, dread creeping in, my instincts screaming for me to stop. The others skidded to a halt beside me, eyes wide and terrified. What do we do now? Peter panted, glancing nervously at the flickering light. It feels wrong. Maybe we can use it to our advantage, I said, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. I stepped closer, ready to grasp the cold metal post of the lamp. But as soon as I did, the light violently flickered again, and a deep rumble echoed through the ground beneath us. Suddenly, the shadows surged, rising like a wave, clawing at the edges of the light. It felt as if the very darkness was alive, testing our resolve, searching for weakness. Get back, I shouted, but my voice sounded distant against the roar. As if it cares about your orders, Sarah muttered, her eyes darting around as the shadows thickened, hungry tendrils stretching long and low, trying to ensnare us. I could see them moving, shifting from the corners of my vision. Dark figures that looked like children, twisted and shrieking, their faces distorted in ways that shouldn't be possible. Run? I yelled, adrenaline pumping. We turned and sprinted toward the alleyway I could see up ahead, frantically searching for a way through the thickening shadows. I could feel the oppressive weight of fear creeping closer. Where do we go? Lucy shouted, her voice breaking. The shadows seemed to pulse with each sound, whispering promises of despair, enticing us with terrifying visions of what awaited in the dark. My heart raced as instinct took over. I charged into the alley, leading the way. But the darkness pressed in behind us like a living creature, tight and suffocating. I could hear the footsteps, the whispers, the laughter. It was everywhere. I wanted to scream and run, wanted to escape the terror clawing at my sanity. The narrow path twisted and turned, and I lost sight of the others for a heartbeat. Guys. I called out, dread flooding my system. I spun around, desperately peering into the consuming darkness. Here? Sarah shouted from somewhere ahead, her voice shaky but firm. I dashed forward, pushing through the shadows as they wrapped around me, trying to pull me back. I finally spotted her, standing beneath a flickering light that barely glowed at the end of the alley. But the moment I reached her, I felt the air shift, a rush like ice filling the alleyway as a chilling laugh echoed around us. The shadows shifted, dark figures emerging from the void, eyes glowing a sickly hue. You think you can hide? They cackled, a chorus of unnatural sounds strangling the air. I turned to retreat, heart pounding in my chest, but the alley was alive with movement, closing in. Run? I shouted again, the horror gripping my throat as I shoved Sarah ahead of me. We sprinted toward the alley exit, every instinct screaming that we had to get away from the darkness before it consumed us whole. Just as we burst into the open street, I felt the powerful rush of something behind us, a dark force pushing at my back. We stumbled onto the pavement, but before we could catch our breath, the shadows surged forward, filling the street, blotting out ever. You think, what now? Peter shouted, backing up toward a parked car, his eyes wide with panic. I could feel the buzz of dread electrifying in the air, a storm brewing at the edge of the night. It was almost like reality was cracking, something sinister teasing at the edges of our vision. Before I could respond, the streetlight flickered again, a powerful surge that momentarily lit up the shadows, revealing faces twisted in unbearable anguish. I couldn't breathe, the weight of their despair washing over me, binding me like a net. I shook my head, forcing myself to focus. The gas station. It's nearby, I shouted. If we can make it there, we can find shelter. With that, I started to run again, pulling Sarah and Lucy with me, the sound of our footsteps muted under the growls that reverberated behind us. I could feel the shadows clawing at my legs, desperately trying to crawl over my skin, but I fought through it, plunging ahead into the night. Every time I glanced back, I could see them getting closer, dark figures with hollow eyes, shapes that twisted and jerked unnaturally. They were relentless. Faster, I urged, adrenaline coursing through me as we pushed toward the distant lights that shimmered beneath the choking fog. Finally, the gas station stood before us, its neon sign flickering in a way that filled me with desperation and dread. I lunged for the door, heart racing, but it wouldn't budge. It's locked, I yelled, pounding on the glass, panic bubbling to the surface. Look for something. Lucy shrieked, twisting to see how close the shadows were, their eerie forms undulating. I felt a wave of hopelessness crash over me until I saw a rock on the ground. I grabbed it and smashed it against the door's glass, shattering the fragile barrier between us and whatever terror lay behind. We tumbled inside, the sound of glass crunching under our feet, but relief turned into terror as I caught the reflection in the glass door behind us. The shadows poured through, wild and hungry, spilling into the gas station like a flood, pushing through the remnants of the outside world. I turned quickly, grabbing a metal pipe from behind the counter. Get to the back, I yelled, directing Sarah and Lucy toward the storage room. Peter was right behind me, glancing back anxiously. As I turned, I took a breath to ready myself, but the shadows erupted, flooding everywhere, moving like a storm of darkness, whispering incomprehensible phrases that wrapped around my mind. You cannot escape, you belong to us. The growls morphed into a haunting melody that spun around me, spiraling my thoughts until I felt dizzy, lost within their intoxicating grip. But through it all, I could hear the whispers crying for me, the voices weaving through the shadows, pulling me close. Focus. I screamed at myself, raising the pipe like a weapon, swinging wide as one of the figures reached out with its gnarled hands. The metal connected with an echoing clang, the shadowy figure dissipating into a cloud of dark mist. I didn't have time to think. Lucy was at my side, peering into the shadows that moved dangerously close, wisps of smoke curling around her ankles. What do we do? she shouted, panic lacing every word. "We have to find a way out," I said, hurrying everyone toward the back door. But as we moved, the whispers grew louder, wrapping around us like a sinister blanket, their promises wrapping tight and squeezing until I felt my breath quickening, fear clutching at my chest. Those haunting faces lingered at the edges of the light, taunting us further. "Stay with us forever," they called, mingling with laughter that chilled me to the bone. Just as we reached the back, I heard Peter gasp. I turned to see him frozen near the fridge, staring into the dark corner where shadows pooled heavily. There, something glimmered faintly, a small door that seemed to pulse against the inky blackness around it. "Peter, don't!" I shouted, lunging toward him. The whispers turned sharp, a chorus of screams echoing around us, trying to distract and disorient. But I felt tethered to the place, a sense of ease weighing me down. But he was already stepping forward, drawn to whatever lay hidden within the dark. "There's a way through," he murmured, a hint of madness creeping into his voice. "I can see it." "Stop," I screeched, grabbing his arm, trying to pull him back. But he shook me off, eyes wild and unseeing, as if he was seeing something I could not. In that moment, everything else disappeared. The gas station, the shadows behind us, even my friend's urgent shouts faded into a murmur. I was left in a cocoon of darkness, staring at Peter, who began to smile. A smile so unnerving, so far from himself. The whispers turned into desperate cries, clawing at my mind. "Join him, you belong with us, you cannot escape." I felt a surge of panic shoot through me, the raw fear fueling my resistance. "No. Get away from him," I shouted, lunging forward as shadows twisted around Peter. I raised the pipe once more, but as I swung, the shadows dashed away, pulling him deeper into their grasp. "Help me," he cried, reaching out, pleading, but there was something wrong in his voice, something distorted like the laughter that echoed in the corners of my mind. I pulled back, terror coursing through my veins, my heart racing as I fought against the encroaching darkness. "We can't let them take any of us. Fight it," I screamed, looking at Sarah and Lucy, desperation etched across my face. We formed a line, inching closer to Peter, but the shadows began to close in, billowing like a dark fog that swallowed the light. I could hear their voices beckoning, sweet promises that twisted around my mind. "Let go, come play with us." "No. Leave him," I yelled, lunging again, feeling my heart thudding like a war drum. I aimed for the glimmer, the dark door that seemed to beckon. If I could just get him back, if I could just grab him one more time. But the whispers sharpened into furious howls. "Come to us, you belong." And I felt it, an urge to give in, to surrender to the darkness that promised freedom from fear. I shook my head hard, forcing my thoughts back. "Come on. Together," I shouted to Sarah and Lucy. Taking a step forward, I swung wildly, shattering the tension. The fateful hold on us even as the darkness shrieked back, swirling and snapping like a wild beast. I was ready to fight whatever hell came our way. But in that moment I also understood, what if I failed? What if I lost them to the terrible night? "Peter, please," I called, trying to find a thread of humanity in those wild eyes. "Come back. We need each other." He hesitated, the shadows swirling, shifting around him like a living shroud. The struggle in his gaze flickered, just a heartbeat. I felt the tiniest spark of hope rise, and I leaped forward, grabbing his arm tightly. "Let's get out of here," I urged, pulling, and just at that moment, the shadows surged around us, eager, ravenous, trying to reclaim their lost prize. "Fight it. We can escape." As I pulled Peter forward, the darkness writhed, voices rising in a furious crescendo. I could feel the shadows clawing at me, seeking to drag me down, tasting my fear. "We're not done yet," I yelled defiantly. With a final surge, I pulled Peter free from the shadow's grasp, the pressure of the dark tightening around us. We stumbled backward, our friends stepping forward, joining me in a tight circle. But as we backed away, the sharp laughter returned, echoing like 1,000 tortured souls. "You think you can leave?" they hissed, but we pressed on, determined to beat back the tide of terror. We turned, sprinting toward that back entrance, the only way toward the fading hope of safety. The growling shadows surged again, closing the distance, but I felt the... We turned, sprinting toward that back entrance, the only way toward the fading hope of safety. The growling shadows surged again, closing the distance, but I felt the adrenaline surge through my body. The dim light in the gas station felt so fragile against the swirling darkness, but we couldn't stop now. I could hear the laughter echo, a chorus of sinister voices promising despair and doom. With every step we took, the shadows seemed to pulse with anger, rushing toward us like a storm ready to unleash its fury. Faster, I yelled, pushing myself beyond what I thought was possible. I risked a quick glance back and saw dark figures emerging, their faces twisted in malice, lips curling into cruel grins that froze the blood in my veins. As we reached the back door, I pulled on the handle, expecting it to give. But it resisted, stuck and unyielding. Panic flooded me as I glanced back again. The shadows were almost upon us, their forms now clear, horrible mockeries of human shapes, limbs straining and elongating as they moved closer. "Help me," I shouted, shoving my shoulder against the door, but it wouldn't budge. Looking at my friends, I saw fear mirrored in their eyes. "We have to get out." "Try the window," Peter urged, pointing to a small window nearby. I glanced at it, hoping it was open. Desperation pushed me forward as I scrambled up on a crate, reaching for the latch. With a swift yank, it gave way and I felt the rush of cold air hit my face as I kicked it open. I turned back, urging Sarah and Lucy to climb through. Before they could move, the shadows lunged forward, stretching out toward us like gnarled fingers. I felt terror grip my throat as they roared, a sound so full of anguish it threatened to pull me into its depths. "Hurry!" I yelled, desperate. Lucy dove through the window, and I felt the tug of darkness trying to pull me back as I reached for Sarah. "Get in. Now!" I shouted, feeling the shadows claw at my heels, determined to consume us. Just as I pulled her through, a shadowy tendril brushed against my arm, icy and clammy. I screamed, a raw sound escaping my throat as I yanked my arm free just in time to slip out of the grasp. We fell onto the gravel outside, breathless and wide-eyed, the gas station behind us enveloped in a roiling mass of darkness. I turned, fear swirling inside me as I saw the figures collapsing in on the window, screeching and writhing in fury. "Run!" I shouted again, and we bolted down the street, away from the nightmare that nearly consumed us. As we ran, I could still hear the echoes of their twisted laughter weaving through the night, haunting and relentless. It felt like a bad dream that wouldn't let go, and I could still sense their presence lurking in the shadows just out of sight. My heart raced as the asphalt crunched under our feet, my lungs burning in the cold night air. But as we dashed further down the road, something strange started happening. The faint whispers began to change, morphing into song, an eerie lullaby that sent shivers down my spine. "They want you to come back," the song seemed to say, sweet yet sinister, begging me to listen, to slow down. I could feel my resolve wavering, the seductive call of the darkness pulling at the edges of my mind. "Don't listen," Sarah shouted, breaking through the spell. "Just keep running." Her words pushed me forward when everything inside me wanted to stop. I concentrated on the lights ahead, focusing on the town just visible through the fog. There had to be safety somewhere. We ran on, breathless and terrified, but as we reached the edge of the town, everything shifted again. A low rumble rolled through the ground, rattling my bones. The streetlights flickered violently, casting strange shadows that danced around us. I dared to look back one last time, and what I saw made my heart sink. The shadows had taken form, dark figures standing tall and imposing at the border of the town, hollering with rage and sorrow. "You can never escape us," they howled, their voices a monstrous blend of laughter and loss. "You belong to the night." I felt my courage falter. Were we truly free? The sensation of being hunted settled over me, heavy and suffocating. "We can't stop," I gasped, but even as I ran, doubt gnawed at my insides. Just then, a blaring horn startled me and a truck came barreling down the street. Brake lights flickered and the driver shouted, "Get in." I didn't think. I sprinted toward the vehicle, dragging my friends with me, leaping into the cab just as the shadows surged forward, eager to reclaim their prey. "Drive. Go," I shouted at the driver, my heart racing as the truck sped away from the town limits. As the distance grew between us and the darkness, I turned to catch my breath. The looming figures began to fade, their voices drifting off into the night. They were left behind, simmering in the dark, with a promise of a return that sent chills down my spine. Though we had escaped, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not truly free. The shadows lingered in my mind, whispering and waiting. Each moment held the weight of their presence, a reminder that they would always be out there in the dark. I finally let out a shaky laugh, relief washing over me. But as we looked at each other, I saw the shadows of doubt in my friend's eyes, the shared understanding that the darkness would never fully let go. And a part of me wondered, was this just the beginning?